Welcome to part 2 of the Rithmatist. Well, part 2 of the episodes. We're technically on part 3 of the book, whatever.
Yeah. Episode 2, part 3, I guess. I don't know.
I was browsing the library the other day just for the kick of it. And I got curious about, like, Brandon's books, how they're doing on there, and see, like, which ones are on there, what they have, and blah, blah, blah. And I felt bad for some of these people because it was insane. There was, like, over 1,100 people on the wait list for Tress of the Emerald Sea.
Oh my God.
And, like, 400 for The Sunlit Man. And it was, like, similar numbers for, like, almost all of his books. Like, all of them have these massive wait lists. I'm like, oh, dang. These people must not have any money or just, for some reason, don't want to buy Brandon's books. I'm like, if I had to wait that long, I'd be like, screw it, I'm buying the book. I'm not going to wait that long. That's insane. Yeah. But there's lots of people who want to get into Brandon's books and want to read them.
One cool thing, though,
cool.
about at least the Libby app is you can reserve a book, and then if your time comes to check it out, you can pass, but still keep your spot in line. So that when you are ready to it, you'll be the very next one to get the book. And so
that is nice.
But
you still have to wait. Like if you pass it, you have to wait for the person who got it for them to finish it.
Yeah, but like you don't go back to the end of the line. Like,
okay, that is.
I had a friend where he was doing the audio books of, I think it was The Wheel of Time, and it was like that. Just like every single book had like hundreds of people in line, so he just reserved like 4 books at a time. Oh, no, and then as he was reading through them, so then eventually he was on the front of the line on all of them by the time he got to the book to read. So, like, not a bad strategy. But
yeah, that's not bad.
But still, even the Libby app, though, is bad because I actually tried to check out the Rithmatist because I wanted to read on my Kindle and the physical book. And let's see, I think the app will tell me, but I think it was like 3 months I had to wait in order to get it. Let's see though what it said.
For the audiobook or just like the Kindle?
Just the Kindle book.
Wow. That surprises me. I actually decided to listen to it this time around since this is my second read. And I was like the third person in line for the audiobook, so I got it actually pretty quick. I thought I would have to read a good chunk of it, but I got to listen to the whole thing, so.
Yeah, all it says is the Rithmatist, several months is what it says. But I'm only 27th in line in 6 copies.
But still, you can, so that's like, the average library lets you check out a book for 3 weeks, so 20 whatever times 3, that's a ton of time to be waiting.
There's another book that I'm 204th in line.
Oh, what does that one?
It's called The 3-Body Problem.
The 3-Body Problem.
Well, this one I'm 811th in line.
Do you even look at those before you see?
I was just like, place hold.
What is that one?
That one's Hail Mary.
What series is that? Is that demon one you've been reading?
No. It's the one I just like, well, maybe I'll read that.
That's insane. I have no books on hold because I don't know what you want to call me, but I like to buy my books. If they're good. If you want to know the truth, I wish I would have checked out The Shadow of What Was Lost instead of bought it. Now it's tainting my shelf. He's still looking through them all.
I'm trying to figure out how to return a book. I can't figure out how to do it.
Part 3. Was there only 3 parts in this? I think there was only 3 parts. I didn't notice a 4th.
Yeah, I don't remember there being a 4th part. But
yeah, but the part 3 is where things get super crazy.
Yeah, it definitely starts to pick up. This time, the son of a 9th senator, which I think we went to this last time, it doesn't really explain what a 9th senator is, other than he's a powerful politician. His son is taken, but his son kind of put up a better fight than most of the other students that were taken, or than both the other students that were taken. So much so that he was able to draw a sketch of who the kidnapper looked like, of what the kidnapper looked like, as well as kind of like a description. It's kind of like a man in a bowler hat and a cane.
They tried to make us think it's Exton because he has a bowler hat. So you're like, ugh! Yeah, like you were saying.
But this is the first time that they found dead bodies.
Yes, it was actual dead people. Usually, like, they can't even tell They assume there's some people who think these people have just been killed and their bodies are hidden somewhere, buried somewhere, or they've been kidnapped. It seems to be like the two ideas.
But we don't know for sure because they just find blood at the scene. It's a little bit of blood, not even a lot, just a little bit of blood, and then nothing.
Aside from
But
the
in
two
this
dead
case,
people.
yeah, there's dead servants, and so they're like, "Oh, my eyes are really itchy." And then so they're like, "What's happening now?" And they're like, "If only he had come to the school." And they're like all freaking out because now there's like actual dead people.
Which is funny, but not in a funny way. How people act to this kind of crap. Like for so many years, the Rithmatists have been like protecting everyone in Nebraska, keeping like the wild chalklings. But then suddenly, these other chalklings show up and like kids are disappearing. So now they're all freaking out, and now all the non-Rithmatist people and the parents are just like, "Oh, you guys are terrible. We hate you. You're causing all these problems." And it's like, you dumb craps. Your kids aren't even in danger, and you're freaking out.
Right.
I always hate that. People becoming so crazy over stuff when shiz hits the fan, and instead of keeping a cool head and like trying to figure out the problem, they just want to.
Yeah, so there's like protests and people like doing graffiti and stuff, and security's increased, and more people are trying to, I don't know, everyone's just kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
And it's just bringing up other problems.
Mm-hmm.
They see the new rhythmic lines, or at least what Joel suspects is rhythmic line, which is like swirly pattern that he swears is familiar. And then actually he has a discussion with the principal, and then kind of has like a realization, and he goes to his father's workshop. And then we learn a little bit more about his daddy. It turns out his dad was like, I think they call him a closet genius, where like he really knew a lot about rhythmatics, even though he wasn't really taken super seriously by the other professors. It turns out that he was really on the cusp of discovering new lines, even though he himself wasn't a rhythmatist, and he was either so close or at least so convincing that he got like a bunch of different schools to sign a contract saying that if he discovered new lines, that they would like pay him tons of money. And he technically did discover a new line, the swirly pattern. He just couldn't figure out how to get it to work. And then we also learn more that lines work because the rhythmatist knows what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
like
which I thought was interesting.
So that opens up the floodgate possibilities of like there's tons of lines people don't know. You just don't know what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so we kind of make that discovery, and then Joel and his mom move back into the warehouse. They're kind of like healing from their trauma. And then we also get a glimmer of hope for Joel because Melody is kind of like, to pay you back for vouching for me. I guess we didn't mention why he vouched for her. So she followed them to the Callaway place and sent a Chalking to spy. And then they made them suspect her as the murderer for a little bit. And but Joel was like, nah.
Yeah, that's not how she is. She's just nosy and wants to be involved in all of the crap.
Yeah. But anyways, to make up for that, she's like, I just realized when you went to the Inception thing, you never actually went inside the chamber.
Yeah.
And so it didn't count. And so they concoct a plan, because the 4th of July, which is when they do it, is just around the corner. And so they're going to try to convince the religious leaders to let Joel go into the chamber to see if he becomes a rhythmatist. So the night before they go to the Inception, Joel gets attacked. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and this is like a shock on two fronts, because Joel's not a rhythmatist, so you just don't want to expect it. And up until this point, it's only been rhythmatists that have been attacked.
Yeah. And then we finally learn what the swirly lines do. They dampen sound.
Yeah, I like the way they put it, the still sound.
Still sound.
Of course, Brendan has to come up with a fun way to put it. Instead, it made it quiet. Nope, it stole his voice, or I can't remember if they said that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that was one mystery solved. We learned why no one even knew, like, the Rithmatists were, like, fighting for their lives.
Because if you yell, it makes it less than a whisper.
Yeah, there's no yelling. No yelling can get through. Nothing the person going after these Rithmatists can get through, so he can probably be loud as he wants and stuff. And whoever this is was, like, super clever, because they seem to be able to figure out, at least with Joel, they figure out, like, really easily where he was going to go, and he, like, almost went right into the trap this person laid. So, like, everywhere he went, that silencing line was there just waiting for him, and yeah. Good night, make a sound.
But luckily he's able to think quickly.
Yes.
And escape the trap.
Yeah.
And he runs into Exton, who's like the office clerk dude. And they're kind of able to fend off the Chalkings a little bit because Exton's excommunicated Rithmatist.
Excommunicated.
I don't even know if that's the phrase.
He was expelled. That's what they said. But I forgot what they said why he was expelled. But yeah, he was expelled.
He couldn't control his Chalkings.
Oh yeah.
And so it was dangerous. They said he was dangerous. At least that's what they said in the book. It was with that same thing where they're kind of like, don't give every detail. They're like, he couldn't control his Chalkings.
Yeah, which is kind of stupid because he couldn't control his Chalklings, so that he wasn't allowed to go to Nebraska. So then he was, like, disgraced and expelled or whatever. And now it's like he's on this list. Like, oh, he was expelled from this school and blah blah blah. Now we hate him. It's jerks.
Yeah. But Joel's able to make it to the police that are guarding the main gateway, and they have acid there. But then the Chalkings don't really attack; they kind of run away. But the interesting thing about these Chalkings, though, is that they normally, if you like spray acid on them, the Chalkings or chalk in general just completely erases. But if you hit these specific Chalkings with acid, they reform still. So they're kind of like in their own thing.
They're not like normal.
They're like normal.
Shock.
Yeah. So, but all this happens before Joel's thing, and so. But then Captain Inspector Harding's like really confident. He's like, "Don't worry, and before the morning, I will have made an arrest." And then he arrests Exton, which we learn later he's been framed. But it seems pretty convincing because they've apparently planted, or evidence is found in his desk of belongings of the 3 missing students. And they find papers of him supposedly ranting and raving about how much he hates Rithmatists and wants revenge. And so they're like, see, it's obviously him. And then Joel's like, I don't know.
But everyone, like, this is one of those like classic stories where, like, everyone is convinced, but the main character, Joel, is like, something is not right. Something doesn't feel right. Something's wrong. Yeah. And he talks about how when Exton barricaded them in the office, how he drew his rhythmatic lines, but they were terrible. They were crap. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, he's just trying to fool you, Joel. And he wasn't really scared of the Chalklings coming to get him. He just wanted to make it look like he was scared for his life. And Joel's like, it still doesn't feel right.
It still doesn't make sense.
And he's still like, but Nalazar.
Yeah, he's like obsessed with Nalazar.
Yeah, seriously.
He's like, that guy.
He totally makes me think of Harry and Snape because it's like
no matter what.
The same thing. Like, no matter how much he's like, Nalazar, they're like, no, this excuse. But Nalazar, no, but this excuse. So it's, and of course, even like this chief of police, this inspector guy was like, Nalazar saved me personally. So you're like, oh, well, I still don't trust him.
Joel goes to the thing. He goes to the inception ceremony, and when he's there, he sees something. I forget what they called it.
Was there a picture in the book of this thing? Okay, I couldn't remember if there was.
Yeah. On page 329.
Oh, that's not what I thought it was picturing.
Because I remember Joel was like, oh, it's like the same picture that, what's his name, Gregory said that he saw in the thing. And then Joel goes to like touch it, and then it like runs away from him. And then he sits there praying or so for an hour, and then until he comes out, and then he's not a Rithmatist. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that drawing, that thing he saw, because it wasn't on the wall, it was like standing up, and like not 3D, but it wasn't forced to be on the ground.
It was still like a 2D thing, but standing up and not
Yeah.
stuck to a wall or floor.
And then apparently that's what all arithmetists see. That makes them a arithmetist, but for some reason it didn't make Joel a arithmetist.
Yeah. So I'm super curious to see where this story is going to go if Brandon actually ever does continue the story, because I think it's totally in keeping with like Brandon's style to like have a main character who is not like this special in the way like he's not this like powerful magical dude.
Yeah.
I mean, like he wants to be, but he's like proving that in spite of his inability to be a arithmetist, he still is like he's more competent than the arithmetist. He's able to figure this out. Like everyone else, the police and Professor Fitch, like none of them figure out what's going on, but Joel does, and he's not a arithmetist. And even though like everyone's like, you're not the arithmetist, so you need to stay out of arithmetist stuff, and you're not allowed to do it, he still like learns it, and therefore is able to solve this mystery, which I thought that's totally Brandon's style. So I kind of am curious to just see like if he won't become a arithmetist ever, or if this is going to be like maybe he will be a arithmetist because he saw the thing that apparently changes or something. Like there's some big reveal coming in this series that I hope we get to see.
Yeah, because Joel even himself, well, I guess we'll get to that later, but yeah, so anyway, he's not a arithmetist. And then they're like, everyone's like, yeah, we caught Exton, so all is well.
Yeah.
And then, but Joel's kind of like unsettled by the whole thing. And then one fateful night.
One faithful or fateful?
Fateful.
Oh.
I don't even remember. Well, Joel was like awake thinking about something, and Melody came over for some reason. I don't even remember. It's funny because I just literally read this today.
Wasn't she couldn't sleep or something?
And she couldn't sleep, and she knew Joel was an insomniac, and so she came to like talk to him. It was 2 a.m. And then they were going to go talk to Fitch about something. Like Joel was still really suspicious of Nalazar. He was like, the guy's a criminal. I freaking know it. And then he went to talk to Fitch, and Fitch was like, it's 2 a.m, you dang kid. Get the frick out of here.
Yeah.
So they leave to go, and they see the dormitory, and they see the police officers there are knocked out, and the door is wide open. So Joel's like, oh, shnikes. And so he sends Melody away to go get help, and then he bursts in there. He's freaking out. He has a bucket of acid, and then he sees something move, and he chucks the acid, and it's Nalazar. The guy trenches Nalazar, and Nalazar's like, you idiot. Like, if you survive tonight, you're going to owe me a new coat. And then the real criminal steps forward.
Yes.
And it is Inspector Harding. And so Joel's like, what the F? And then Harding starts fighting Nalazar and beats Nalazar. And then Melody shows up, and then like there's like a big old battle, and it's a pretty cool battle. Because they're like, it turns out it doesn't seem like Inspector Harding doesn't seem quite like himself. Like he
definitely changed.
And then it turns out that he's been possessed by something called a Forgotten. Doesn't really explain what it is, but it seems like some sort of chalk creature. And they're the ones that are controlling the chalkings in Nebraska.
Yeah, and these Forgotten really fascinate me because they seem like chalklings don't really come off as like something insanely powerful. Like you can fight them, and they're still this like chalk that's stuck to the ground, and they have to be drawn. But you can defend yourself against them. But like, what the heck creatures are powerful enough that they can like possess a human? Yeah. And from what it sounds like, completely take over. Like they kill the person and then take over their body or something like that.
I don't think they're not dead. Because remember, so they end up defeating Professor Harding because they like throw something, like they do something to make the Forgotten kind of like almost separate from Harding.
Wait, who's Harding?
Inspector Harding.
Oh.
Right?
For some reason I thought it was some other name, but yeah, Inspector Harding.
And then Inspector Harding, and then they're able to do something to kill the Forgotten. And of course, Professor Fitch like really shines in this scene because he's using both his hands with chalk, and he's just like drawing chalkings and like defenses, and he's doing really well holding his own. And Melody and Joel are kind of able to help as well. Eventually defeat him, but then remember later, after the Forgotten's gone, Inspector Harding is still around, and he's like in custody, and he's saying he doesn't remember anything that happened. And then Joel's even like, it was only at night that the Forgotten took over, and during the day, Professor Harding was himself. So it's almost like an imperious curse.
Yes. But still, like, what? Even if you don't kill them, how do these whatever creatures, these forgotten? I don't think, are they actually some sort of chalk creature, or are they something else? Is also my question.
That's a good question.
Like, is there some sort of chalk thing that can, like, if they bite you, they can get into your body and then take over or some crap, or is it something else that's a little stronger?
And then everything seems hunky-dunky after this. Everyone's like really proud of Joel and Melody, and everything seems to go back to normal, and they're trying to do everything like good, and they're going to do the melee, and Joel gets a front row seat because he's the
And I think at this
hero.
point too, one thing that I really liked is I can't remember if it was before. I'm pretty sure it was before, because like it ends right after this
melee.
the duel. But Principal York talks to Joel, and he's like, I talked to the other schools, the people who had contract with his dad, and he thinks he's got some of them convinced to pay their contract, even though it's been expired. And he says, this school is going to pay your contract. So
it's more than enough to pay off the
yeah,
debts.
so... Oh, we never talked about that, but like the reason... You think that the reason Joel's mom like works her butt off is because she has to pay this outrageous tuition for the school, but it's actually because...
She's trying to pay back the debts.
Yeah, she's trying to pay back the debts that Joel's dad got.
Was traveling all over trying to do studies and was racked up all his debt.
And it turned out all these years that his tuition has actually been free.
Yeah.
And his mom's not trying to pay that back. But so that's good. They got out of debt and like that huge stress. So maybe in the next book she won't be as stressed out. Maybe she'll have a better job. Maybe she'll have a day job so she doesn't have to work nights,
like
which
night,
must super suck.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but man, I've never had like a graveyard type job, but I've had like really late going jobs and really early jobs, and it sucks. Like if you have to work before 8 a.m., then this is like, why even exist? Or if the work's super late. But so I thought that was really cool. But we have a really interesting conversation between Nalazar and Joel just before this like end of the summer melee.
Yes, because it turns out Nalazar is also possessed by chalking, but a much more clever planning one. And it turns out Joel finds out, I was like, oh, that's why, because the one thing that's made Joel suspicious this whole time of Nalazar is that he keeps checking out books on like theory and stuff. Nalazar does. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, oh, that's why you're checking out all those books, because you're trying to find out the human strength and weaknesses so you can bust out a Nebraska.
Yeah, so he's not actually trying to learn new lines. He wants to know what the humans know about Rithmatics.
Yes. And
which
then
is definitely super clever.
Joel kind of like fleshes out his plan, and then some interesting things are said. Some things like I think are foreshadowing.
100%.
Because Nalazar says things like, so it's hard for me to notice non-rhythmic people, and then he says, I don't know why they don't want you. And then Joel's kind of thinking about that, and then Joel kind of realizes that Inspector Harding wasn't a rhythmatist, but when he was possessed by the shadow thing, the Forgotten, he was able to have rhythmatic powers. That makes Joel think of the thing he saw in the Inception Chamber, and it kind of makes him think, and it made me think, that is there like a secret kind of in the background battle between two different chalk type creatures, and the humans don't even realize that the rhythmatists are themselves possessed by
like the good
some
ones?
sort of chalk creature.
Well, that'd be really interesting.
And kind of what makes me think that too, is we forgot to mention this, is so the chalkings that Harding is using during all his attacks are like weird, different kind of chalkings. They're like formless and just like weird. But when the shadow dies, they like turn back into people. Yeah, and so it turns out somehow, because during the attack on the dormitory, Joel sees Harding's chalkings attack several rhythmatist students and like turn them into these chalkings. And then when he dies, they kind of all come back to their human forms, like all the missing students and also a lot of missing rhythmatists from Nebraska.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing we never mentioned either is that Melody had a brother who died in Nebraska, and he comes back.
And that's when Joel, during this conversation with Nalazar, he's like, oh, that's when you got possessed, because when William got attacked, you led an expedition, and Harding was with you to go and try and save him. And at that point, you were possessed. And then Nalazar was like, oh, I'm going to keep my eye on you.
Yeah. But so this is the part where it made me think that these Forgotten killed their host, is because Joel even says like, oh, Nalazar is not alive, is he? He died back
The
there.
real Nalazar.
The real Nalazar.
But then he also says that a new Rithmatist can't be made until an old one dies. And so their plan was, if there's no...
They're not actually dying.
They're not actually dying. They're just turning into these talking creatures. Then there's going to be no new Rithmatist eventually.
Yeah.
It turns out that was part of his plan.
Mm.
And then the second part of his plan, the reason why he became a professor, is he's like training all these students, and he's going to make sure that they win this melee, because this melee helps them get really prestigious positions in Nebraska, and they're going to be like under his influence. So Joel's like, can't let that happen.
Yeah. So that means that the last episode we were kind of talking about how this series is probably not going to take it's not going to be completely at the school. So maybe he's going to be going up to Nebraska and trying to figure out how to fix things there.
Yeah, 'cause there's a larger plot at hand, and this Forgotten has the escapade. But Joel's publicly acknowledged him as a hero, so he's like, no one's going to believe me if I say...
Yeah, because it's like they have Inspector Harding, so they're not going to be like, oh, Joel, we've already got the real one. They're going to do the same thing they did with the Exton.
Yeah.
And be like, no, we got the actual person. So Nalazar is not it. And he's got to find like he's going to have to fight that somehow, I'm sure, in the next book, figure out how to protect people from Nalazar, and maybe even try to convince people that it actually is Nalazar.
Yeah.
Or at least that Nalazar is a big part of it, that he's also escaped from Nebraska.
Yeah.
I hope we learn what the goal of all these Chalklings are, and the Forgotten, mostly the Forgotten, I guess, and it seems like they're the ones that are in control, but are the Forgotten the one that are controlled? Are they like the minions of some higher power? And what is what is the end goal of all these guys?
Because Nalazar even says he said, I'm a teacher and I'm a student.
Oh yeah, so.
But I guess he was talking more about like the books he was reading. But so who knows?
Yeah, so it's just really. I want to know. Do they want to rule the world? Do they just hate people? So they want to kill them all? Like what?
Yeah.
What is going on? So some ancient enemy who was just defeated, and they want revenge.
I don't know.
We really don't. This feels like just the tip of the iceberg. It was like the very basic introduction, because they even talk about when they were at that boy's house, that last one who was kidnapped. Like there just seems to be things going on in Nebraska that is not being explained. So we got a lot of potential still in this book. So I'm really hoping that Brandon was serious when he said he's gonna keep going on this series.
Yeah, me too.
It's got so much more that could be into it.
Yeah. But then to the melee, apparently the rules of the melee is each arithmetic professor has to at least put in one student to join, and so Melody is forced to, because she's the only arithmetic student that Fitch has. Yeah. But then Joel, after discovering all these plans, realizes that he needs to stop Nalazar's students from winning the melee. Mm-hmm. And so he's able to, because of some technicality in the rules where he was technically a student, and there's nothing technically that says a non-arithmetic person can't participate. And so he joins Melody, and they make quite the team.
Yeah.
Because Joel's able to perfectly draw everything. He just can't make it come to life, so he uses blue chalk, and he draws everything, and then Melody comes and traces over his work and activates it, and he makes like the perfect Eastern defense, which is for everything, and they start kicking butt.
And the thing that's super impressive about this that I really liked is that Melody is not a good strategist at all, it would appear. Yeah. And she not only just really wouldn't have been able to defend herself or even become offensive in this melee, but she picked her spot to be like in the middle of
so it wasn't picked,
arena.
They drew lots.
Did they draw lots?
It was random.
Oh, so she got screwed. Okay, maybe she is a good strategist then, but who knows? But anyway, that's whatever it was. I thought it was awesome that they.
Yeah, because Nalazar fielded 12 students and had been teaching them how to be aggressive duelists, but they get foiled and get defeated, and everyone's like, "Wow, that's amazing."
Another thing that was super
Fitch was
cool.
all proud too. He was all like, "They're my students."
Yeah. There was 2 lines through this whole thing, 2 new arithmetic lines that were discovered. There was that one of silencing, but then there was they have lines of vigor that like shoot off like ammo, but there was a new line like that they discovered that's a little better.
What was it called? Line of something with an R.
Line of reckoning, I want to say, but I don't remember.
I think it was reckoning. Revocation. Line of revocation.
Yeah, so they do a little bit of, I don't even know what you want to call this, like drawing attention, like, oh, suckers. They're really just trying to it just came off as like, Like, you guys underestimated us, so suck this line.
Yeah.
But yeah, so throughout the duel, they had like all these little things, and another thing that actually helped with this melee too is that Melody is beyond the talent of any other Rithmatist when it comes to chalklings.
Yeah, because normally
Like,
chalklings you have to come up with like a detailed list of instructions.
Yeah, and not only that, you have to like write out each thing to tell it to do. You can't just be like and use your mind power.
But she's never had to do that. They just do what they what
she
wants.
does have like the mind power or whatever. Like, she can just draw it and it knows what to do, and it can do much more complicated things than anyone else's.
And she loves unicorns, and her
yeah, so her unicorns
like,
just wrecked everyone.
Yeah, they totally kick butt.
With Joel's advanced knowledge and like being defensive and even offensive, and he seems to be strategizing very well. He and Melody / mostly just Melody, I guess, become victorious. They defeat everyone.
Yep.
Which is super cool.
And then that's kind of where it ends.
Yeah.
Where now Joel kind of looks up and sees Nalzar looking at him, and he's kind of like, "I'm watching you." But more foreshadowing is given because Professor Fitch, we get Professor Fitch's perspective for a couple of pages.
Yeah.
And he's kind of also looking at Nalzar, and he sees Nalzar watching them and being like, "Amazing! Wow, it's so beautiful what they're doing." Not realizing that it's the Forgotten being like, "Oh, wow," like learning about human defenses and being like, "I'm going to have to watch those two very closely." Like, that's what he says.
Yeah.
And Fitch is like, "Oh, there's hope for this guy. Yeah, maybe he'll turn out to be a good guy." So, like, Fitch, like, it's obviously becoming harder in the future for Joel to convince anyone that Nalzar is actually evil.
Yeah.
So, but all in all, it was a good book. I would definitely place it in the YA category.
Yeah, definitely.
I wouldn't call it a kid book, but definitely like the plot and the structure and the pacing and the story. And I wouldn't say it was shallow, but deep enough to be like care about the characters, but not like super deep. So just good all around Brandon Sanderson writing, but definitely more of a YA book. But definitely worth picking up.
Maybe you could have your boy Elijah read this book.
Eventually, I don't know how he'll do with chalkings eating people alive and eating their eyes and tearing their skin.
Black out those parts.
Yeah, everything else other than those descriptions, I think totally.
Yeah,
it's totally a fine book for kids. But yeah, definitely discretion advised if you don't want your kids reading descriptions of people being eaten alive by chalkings. It's not very nice.
I always think that kind of stuff is less traumatic when you're reading a book. If you have to see it, like you can see it and hear it, then that's kind of like, oh.
That's true. Yeah, so definitely on a more different level.
Do you always think about that? You don't always. Zane, I always think about in like my kids' movies, like how different things are for us nowadays. It's like in Pinocchio, when they're in the island, Pleasure Island, and then they all start turning into donkeys. There's like that Pinocchio made that one friend who's like a total twerp of a kid. Like,
yeah,
he's super young and he like wants to smoke and drink and be a bad kid. And anyway, the scene where he like starts turning into a donkey and how he just loses his mind and freaks out, like that's sort of like, oh my gosh. But that's how we grew up. But now kids are just like, oh, I just want to watch Bambi. or whatever. I mean, even Bambi, there's some traumatic parts in that one that I don't really see in kids' movies these days. Yeah. But I mean, like, what made me think of that is like, imagine like watching that scene versus if you read it. Would it be as...
Probably not, but...
Yeah. Unless you're really good at like adding stuff in your brain, like music and sound. How did you feel about reading this book physically rather than like on a Kindle?
Yeah, I liked it.
I liked it too. Because these books, one thing I love about paper books is like how floppy they are. And this was a really nice floppy book that just felt super good to hold. So I enjoyed reading that book for two reasons. Because it was a good book and it felt good to hold. Have you had any science fiction books come up in your life?
No. I haven't. Have you?
I still count Skyward, but
it's
been around for a while. But yes, we're looking for a good science fiction book to read. I think that'd be a fun change of pace. We're usually like a little more strictly fantasy. Not necessarily because I think we are like, oh, science fiction, screw that crap. But it's more just like fantasy.
That's kind of where we go.
That's our forte. But still, science fiction books can be really interesting and like just as good as fantasy books. So
yeah, I agree.
if you have any recommendations, let us know, and maybe we'll see it in time to pick it. Well, we're gonna end things there with the finishing of the Rithmatist. Super great ending, in my opinion. It only sucks because this book came out forever ago, and we don't have the second one yet, so we can't satisfy our hunger to know what happens and know what this mystery is in Nebraska and how they're going to face it.
Yeah, 11 years ago it came out.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to scratch the itch that is not going to be sitting in our brain cells just waiting and torturing us. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed The Rithmatist, and if you haven't read it, we hope you decide to give it a shot. Go to your local library or something if you're not sure about it, and maybe this one doesn't have a crazy wait. Hopefully not. But until next time, we'll catch you on the flippity flop. Say goodbye like a nice person.
No.
No. It's over.